Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Miller. We are back for chapter 9 of The Missing Manatee. At the end of chapter 8, Skeeter and Dirty Dan are out tarpon fishing. He made some casts. They weren't the greatest, but Dirty Dan always had something positive to say about them. The sun's getting high. Dirty Dan wants to move on to another spot, but remember, if Skeeter tells anyone, he'd have to kill him. Was he serious or was he not? He couldn't tell. As Dan began slowly pulling the boat, I saw what made this location so special. The water was 4 to 6 feet deep with large stretches of light-colored sandy bottom and hardly any grass. The sun's nice and high now, said Dan. What you gotta remember is that the water can be a mirror or like a window. Look at it and all you'll see is a reflection of the sky. Look through it and you'll see what's below the surface. I practiced looking through the water. But when Dan said in a low, urgent voice, "Fish at 10 o'clock, Skeet," coming right towards us, I didn't see a thing. I looked toward 10 o'clock and got my rod ready anyway. "Don't cast yet. He's still too far. See him? 200 feet. No, I said, squinting in frustration, willing my eyes to see something. Oh boy, there's 3 of them. See him now? I shook my head. Those glasses polarized? Dan asked. I nodded. Without polarized lens, there was no hope of seeing the fish, sun or no sun. You looking through the water, not at it, right? Yeah. I peered and scrunched my eyes tighter, but I couldn't for the life of me see what Dan saw. Then, all at once, I did. 3 dark shapes moving over the light sandy bottom. I see him, I shouted. Coming this way. Okay, now, said Dan very calmly. Settle down, get ready, and think about your cast. You want to put it about 3 yards in front of him. Nice and easy. I made my cast, but it was too far to the right. The fish kept swimming, paying no attention to my fly, and finally spooked when they saw the boat. I muttered in disgust, but Dan only said, "The thing about tarpon, Skeeter, is that he's lazier than an old dog on a noonday sun. Lots of times, he won't move 5 inches out of his way, even for a meal. You got to put it right where he almost has to eat it, or else smack into it. And sometimes even that isn't good enough." He took another sip of butterfly milk and grinned. It wouldn't be any fun if it was easy, now would it? To be honest, I could have gone for a little easy fun right about then, but I wasn't going to admit it to Dan. On my next cast, the lead fish in the group of 4 turned toward my fly. Eat it, eat it, eat it, Dan urged. Then the fish turned away and kept swimming. I moaned, oh man. What do you want? Leave it, Dan told me. The next one might take it. But the next one didn't take it, and neither did the 2 after that. Oh man, I cried. Dan seemed happy though. That was real good, Skeet. You almost got him to eat. Maybe it was all the talk of eating, but suddenly I was starving. Thirsty too. I looked at my watch. It was 10:30. We'd been out for about 4.5 hours, and Dan hadn't sat down once. So, neither had I. He'd been sipping from the whiskey bottle, but I hadn't had anything. My legs felt a little wobbly. I'm just going to grab a drink, I said, laying my rod carefully on the bow. Where do you keep them? Cooler, he said, but his attention was on the water, not the question. I'd already looked at the cooler, but I stepped down to look again. Could I have missed seeing a 6-pack of soda and a sack of sandwiches? My foot landed on a coil of frayed blue nylon rope lying on the bottom of the boat and slipped on it, and I almost fell. Matt kept his boat ship-shape and had taught me to do the same. But I'd noticed Dan didn't seem to care too much about neatness. Oh, that could be a problem. I guess you could stow that, he said absent-mindedly, his attention, as always, on the water. When I looked in the front storage compartment to find a place for the rope, I saw a handgun lying on the molded plastic gun case. Either the case had been left open or it had jiggled open from the movement of the boat. I wasn't too surprised to see it since where we live, lots of people have guns. Pickup trucks like the one we'd seen at Fat Boy's with a gun rack behind the driver's seat were a common sight. It drove Mom crazy. Mac had a gun for a while, but she'd made him get rid of it. I knew Larry kept one behind the counter at the marina. Of course, Earl had one, being a deputy. Dan must have noticed me looking at it because he said, "Next hammerhead tries to steal a fish of mine, gets shot between the eyes." I'm too old to be out in the water wrestling sharks. I grinned the way I always did. Every time I pictured Dan bonking that hammerhead on the noggin with his club. But shooting him doesn't make half as good a story, I answered. That made me think of the story of how Dan got his scar in the hatchet fight over the blonde-haired lady. Maybe Dan would tell me the whole thing while we had lunch. I put the line away and opened the cooler again to look for something to drink. There was the same hunk of cheese which I saw had been nibbled on and an empty mustard jar, but hadn't been any food or sodas in the storage compartment either. When the stinking feeling, I realized that Dan hadn't brought me lunch, and neither had I. "Just bring yourself," he told me. And stupidly, that's what I'd done. Dan had said he had everything we needed, and I guessed from his point of view, we did. He had fishing gear and a bottle of Jack Daniels. Mac always kept some cans of soda, some munchies, and a big jug of fresh water on his boat, and so did I. It was another of Mom's rules for just in case. If she had been up when I left the house, she would have asked a million questions. Do you have your lunch, your drinks, your hat? There are life jackets on the boat, right? But she had left all this to Mac, saying he was in charge, and Mac wasn't used to worrying about whether or not I had lunch. It was the kind of thing that had been happening ever since Mac moved down the street. Some things just fell through the cracks. And we're going to end that part.